Well, it's great to be here. I've had an amazing 3 days here, just wandering around, attending sessions, and just seeing the commitment that Hong Kong's putting into Geriatrics and just trying to figure out how we build a Hong Kong of the future that we can all be proud of. One that's both supportive and reflective of the journey that we're beginning on. I want to really talk to you about the future really of healthcare today, but we've heard a lot of interesting projects that have been going on and trials and some of the other speaking events. And the key thing that I really wanted to talk about today and give you some examples of is some of that technology applied in new ways. So I might just start with a video just to set the scene about the empowering capability of technology.
What is technology? What can it do?
When I lost my eyesight, I thought that my painting days were over.
How far can we go?
By using your hands, you can actually control your X-ray.
Technology has the power to unite us.
Hang on, honey. Hang on.
There he is. You see him?
I can see him.
It inspires us. Technology has taken us places we've only dreamed.
Now I can do whatever I want.
It gives hope to the hopeless.
So your device is on. Can you hear me talking?
And it has given voice to the voiceless.
Technology is really all about empowering us to do new things and find new ways of solving problems that we face every single day. It's about being supportive, it's about helping us do new things and helping us continue to do the things that we want to do. And as you saw with that man who has continued to paint through the use of computing, I just think that is really an empowering example of how technology enables us to continue to do new things. We're really at an interesting time with technology in regards to how it's impacting the way we think about healthcare. One of the things that we see a lot of these days is a shift between hospital-based care with the inpatient volumes actually declining and outpatients volumes increasing. But increasingly, what most of our governments are also faced with is that they can't build facilities fast enough to be able to house all the people that are going to require care and support. And whether you're in Singapore or Hong Kong, where land space is incredibly tight, having to think about new models of care and new models of support is going to be incredibly important. And so the opportunity for all of us in this room and for all of us here at this event is really about that second area, the care of and health without walls. We've been very good at building facilities, but how can we do it in the home? How can we do it remotely? How can we support people where they want to live and where they want to be? Whether it's with their family or living independently, how do we provide the supportive infrastructure to be able to deliver that market? And what's exciting about this change is it's going to bring in a whole level of new economic opportunity for building and designing applications for healthcare. And you only have to see on the show floor as to how many new innovators are going out there thinking about this and building a new business around it. And it's going to be a massive market, a market that is going to be much, much bigger than just the health IT market is today. And you can see that shift. And this is accumulative. And so there's going to be that much more opportunity for building a business in this space going to come forward. And I think that's incredibly exciting. In addition to that, computing is also changing. And computing is rapidly advancing to a point where what we used to do with a keyboard and mouse and now what we do with touch is also going to revolutionize again and move to speech and vision and creating whole new ways of interfacing with machines. And today it's still a very computational focused thing, but as we move into the future, this will become much more natural than it is today, and the way you interact with machines and so forth is going to become a lot more sensible. Here's an example of some work that we've been doing with Case Western University and the Cleveland Clinic in the US. And this one is particularly around medical education, but I just wanted to show it to you as an example of how education is going to change in the way that we teach anatomy. How might you use this to support an elderly care environment? But imagine you can have students all around the world going to a lecture, being able to manipulate objects in their space that they can see in their environment, and be able to talk to their lecturer or professor about what's going on and what they see, and be able to do that as a group and bring people together virtually in a way that they can interact with these objects and talk about them. It's a very powerful thing, but really only scratches the surface of what we're working on to build to be able to enable these new types of scenarios. One of the things that we talk a lot about in aged care, and I'm going to talk a lot about the IoT and the sensors and the wearables because there's been a big focus on that here, but one of the things that we often forget are the actual services that do the delivery of care, the nurses, the caregivers and so forth. Many of those are still running around with paper sheets and pens and doing these kinds of things very, very remotely. And largely the aged care sector and the social services sector has been one that has wanted to do technology but still kind of struggles to do it. And I think that some of the biggest opportunities for innovation are really in this space. Here's an example of Silverchain in Australia, one of the largest community service providers in the Australian marketplace. Can we have some audio, please? Yep.
If this was a completely bespoke solution, we could have been building it for a long time, then we'd be needing to assess how much infrastructure we would need to run it. The beauty with Dynamics 365 is it can scale as the organisation scales.
The other part, which was really important to implementation, was around establishing when patients may have had missed visits. Because we're a community-based provider, we don't have the conventional structure of a ward. And so flagging that on the system as an acute alert has really, on day one, proven benefit and continues to do so.
So one of the things that Silverchain's done is completely transformed all their care processes and got paper out of the organisation. Everything from route planning to job documentation to clinical documentation and so forth is now all being handled electronically. And the amount of improvement that it's delivered in efficiency in regards to how they run that home nursing service is absolutely incredible. The second one I want to talk to you about is an example from New Zealand. Rhymin Healthcare is the largest and arguably one of the most successful aged care providers in the Australia and New Zealand marketplace. They're literally transforming the way we think about an aged care facility from a sort of place that you didn't really want to go, or you had memories of going to see your grandma and granddad there and it not being very pleasant, to an environment that is incredibly supportive and amazing. And their belief, and the CEO's belief, has been to completely change the way technology supports their caregivers, but not just their caregivers, the residents. And so they're putting devices in the rooms of every resident. And I got a tour recently, and you'll see her in the video, of this lady, and she's 87 years old, and she got to use a computer for the first time. And she came over to me and she said, Gabe, this whole thing has just been amazing to me. I never used a computer before and I was really scared. But now I'm completely addicted to Candy Crush, and I play Mahjong, and I do all these things, and I wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. and I can just grab the tablet from the wall and I can start to play my games, and it's given me a whole new lease of life. So they're thinking not just about technology and how it makes nurses feel, but they're actually changing the way that residents feel and interact in the whole experience. Let's have a look at what they're building.
I think change is a constant thing in this world. So I think they will make some changes to the betterment of everybody, for the betterment of the quality that we can give to the residents. I think that's the thing, because we're dealing with the residents here, we're dealing with their lives, we're dealing with how we care with the residents. I think that's the purpose of why we developed this technology, these tools.
It was only about people, it was only about engagement, only about relationships, only about an influential visionary who has an idea and a dream that is semi-impossible to achieve at that point in time when we talked about it. But the fact that he cared about pretty much thousands of people all around here in New Zealand, it made it worthwhile to say, okay, screw your old job, see what you can do here and how you can help with it. What you achieve with that is a step from prehistoric way how you do nursing to a very modern, potentially even super modern way to do nursing.
made it a point, I guess, to make it user-friendly that everybody can understand. The instruction is very simple, and there are some icons that, you know, very understandable, easy to work, easy to play with. And eventually, this will make our life easier. I think that's the best thing of technology. We need to make our lives easier.
While it's fabulous what we're doing as far as staff is concerned, staff, they're used to using computers, but I really think the biggest difference we're going to make is actually going to be about the residents in the rooms and bringing something into their lives that they never would have thought they could do. It's going to be really cool, I think.
I've worked with aged care customers for the last 10 years, and most of these organisations are doing great work, but the level of innovation that's going on the ground floor for the nurses, the caregivers, the patients is just nowhere compared to where the vision of Rhymin is. And so it's just so exciting to see an organisation go and really reach for the stars and make a really big impact. So enough of me, because you can see me here anyway, so we don't need to watch me twice. But I mean, I'm just really inspired because what they're doing is really transforming the way that whole experience for the resident runs. But it changes the way they do rostering, the way they do clinical documentation, the way they're putting IoT sensors into the rooms to be able to collect all that data that nurses or clinic care workers used to previously have to go and do manually. Things like meal ordering, watching interactive television, looking at your lab results, calling your loved ones. All these things are integrated into a completely seamless experience in this aged care in their aged care homes, and they're rolling this out across their 42 facilities that they've got. So the last one I wanted to talk to you about was a company out of Singapore called Silverline, or also known as Connected Life, and they've been working with the very similar problem to Hong Kong and around how do we enable families and loved ones to be able to support their parents more effectively and get telemetry and information out to be able to support that. And they've built a complete commercialized model now, and they're rolling this out with Star Hub and the Housing Development Board and so forth, and is already in a number of homes across Singapore. And the idea is that you integrate a complete dashboard, calendaring, journaling system together with connected smart devices and a set of mobile applications, and really what you're doing is you're putting sensors into the home, and I'll talk a little bit about those shortly. But the key thing is the mobile impact of being able to bring this together and thinking about the use cases, like if you have difficulty seeing, some of these mobile phones with lots of icons are actually quite hard to use. So they've built applications that support the elderly so they can see them and simplify your iPhone or simplify your Android device to make it much more usable, but be able to drive those interactions in a strong way. And so drug reminders, so on and so forth, all happen through this. And then you can also, as a centralized service, aggregate all that data up and be able to report on regional statistics and run a call center to be able to monitor those things. Now, the technology to do this becomes very interesting. And so what I did is I brought some of the devices today just to give you a sense of how the stuff works. Now, this service in Singapore costs about $25 a month. I think most of you in this room would be very comfortable for your parents spending $25 a month for a service that gave you some extra insight. They could request you to help them with their groceries, request you to do all these kinds of things, and be able to communicate with you in case of loneliness and so forth. And what's amazing about it is it's the new technology that's really starting to come to the market now that's solving a lot of the problems with the trial projects that have happened in the past. Here's a new gateway device. Now, gateways are important to be able to connect all these devices, but one of the challenges with the gateways previously was some of them talk one protocol, others talk another protocol, and then different devices from different vendors don't work with each other. And this is a little device with a new chip from Intel called a Quark processor, and this one unit has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, and Z-Wave all integrated in the unit, so you can take any IoT device and plug it in. So you can take a sensor like this. This is a little motion sensor, probably cost about $10. You go into your mum's house, you put it on the wall, you name that thing lounge, and every time that sensor goes off, you've got an event. we've got a small door sensor here. And this door sensor you could put on the fridge, or you could put on a door and say open and close, and you just stick them on and they automatically go and talk to the gateway device to be able to make that happen. A little Bluetooth homing beacon to be able to make that happen. Very, very powerful little tool. And then the most interesting new device is this device from Fujitsu out of Japan. And this thing is absolutely incredible. It has motion sensors, integrated telephony, but it has a whole bunch of additional things. So it can actually, without you wearing anything or having anything on your body, it can monitor how well you sleep, what's happening with your snoring patterns, what's happening if you fall. You can talk to it remotely. And this also talks to this gateway device to be able to provide a completely integrated service. So in short, we're actually at a very interesting time where this technology and price point has come down, and that commercial delivery of it is happening, and it's happening through the cloud computing, and bringing these devices together in the home to be able to make that happen. So we've got an incredibly exciting industry future in front of us, and there's really three things that we need to think about to be able to build this business. One, we need to do a much better job of enhancing the patient and the health professional experience through a number of tools. We need to harness data that's coming off these devices and use that to build our predictive analytical models and events and actions to be able to make that happen. And in order for us to do this, we need to make sure that the whole system has a commitment to transforming to digital. And without that, and if we continue to write things on paper in our business, we're never going to be able to do that. So the exciting thing, I think, for Hong Kong, and as I've seen here, is there's a real will in the government and a real will in all the service providers to make that digital transformation happen. And we very much appreciate being a part of it and having an opportunity to come and speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Thanks for the introduction, and it's my great pleasure to be invited and to speak in this workshop. I'm going to share with you our experience in conducting a large-scale screening program in the community for atrial fibrillation. It's named AFinder program. And through this program, we aim to engage and empower the Hong Kong elderly to prevent stroke caused by atrial fibrillation. Well, I'm sure that all of you know stroke is a very disabling disease. And unfortunately, it is also a common disease, especially in the elderly population. In the year 2012, over 15,000 Hong Kong citizens suffered from stroke, and 1,200 of them died in that year because of stroke. There is a very strong association between atrial fibrillation and ischemic stroke. And if you, unfortunately, you have atrial fibrillation, then you have a 5-fold increase in the risk of developing a stroke. And in fact, 20 to 30% of ischemic stroke is caused by atrial fibrillation. In a normal heart, the heart rate is controlled and initiated by a very small structure in the right atrium. Now, basically, you see in the left side of the diagram, there's a sinus node, which is the small structure that can control the heart rate. And normally at rest, the heart rate is around 60 to 100 per minute. And on the right-hand side, you can see the heart, which is abnormal, and it's in atrial fibrillation. Here you can see the arrows, which denotes the electrical activities in the atrium. Well, with that fibrillating atrium, the electrical activity, in fact, is at least 300 times per minute. So it's very fastly contracting, and that is atrial fibrillation. And we can simply palpate your pulse, and then we would suspect that you might have these arrhythmias or abnormal heart rhythm. To confirm the diagnosis, we have to do a electrocardiogram, which in short we call it ECG or EKG. But conventionally, you have to have this investigation performed in a clinic or hospital. You need 10 electrodes sticking to your body and connecting you to with the cables to a machine. And then you can have this ECG performed. When your heart is in atrial fibrillation, blood clots may form. And if the blood clot is lodged, then it would flow from the great artery to the brain. And this may cause you stroke. But in fact, we have very effective medicine to prevent this from happening. But the problem is, nearly half of us, or half of the patients with atrial fibrillation, would have no symptoms. So from international data, 30% of patients with stroke caused by atrial fibrillation did not know that they have this heart rhythm disorder until they have a stroke. So we need to find the hidden citizens, hidden patients who have these arrhythmias. And we have to find them and treat them before they suffer from a stroke. This shows you the prevalence rates of atrial fibrillation according to age in Hong Kong. So similar to the international studies, the incidence or prevalence of atrial fibrillation increases with age. The older you are, the higher the chance that you would have this abnormal heart rhythm disorder. With that numbers, we can estimate the number of patients with atrial fibrillation in Hong Kong. In the year 2016, we estimate that the number of patients or the number of Hong Kong citizens with atrial fibrillation would be over 56,000. And what is most worrisome would be with an aging population, by year 2030, we would have an almost 50% rise in the number of Hong Kong citizens with atrial fibrillation. Over 80,000 of us would have atrial fibrillation. And if we do nothing at this stage, finally we would see an increase, remarkable increase in the prevalence and incidence of stroke due to atrial fibrillation. Therefore, we conducted our program, the AFinder program, last year with the following objectives. We want to raise the disease awareness. We want to conduct a large-scale community atrial fibrillation screening and identify hidden patients with atrial fibrillation in Hong Kong. And subsequently and hopefully, we can reduce the stroke in Hong Kong. And we emphasize very much on the engagement and empowerment of Hong Kong elderly in this program. It's also our emphasis to engage tightly with different community partners, the doctors, the NGOs, and the elderly. And of course, we need the funding, so we need to engage the sponsors. So this program is initiated by a group of cardiologists and supported by a lot of organizations, and is coordinated by the Hong Kong Council of Social Services. You may remember that I mentioned the difficulty of performing ECG in a community level. With the conventional ECG, we have to do it in a clinic, in a hospital. And with emergence of technology, we can now perform this kind of screening in the community level. So this is the technology we use. It's a small device. It's very handy. It's like here with 2 electrodes. And with this device, we can perform a smartphone-based wireless, no cable, no wire, single lead ECG. We can do it everywhere. We can do it in the community. And we just need 30 seconds. We can put our fingers on top, and the EKG or the ECG will be transmitted in the form of ultrasound to a mobile phone. And the microphone of the mobile phone will receive the signals and convert it back to ECG. And that ECG will be uploaded to the iCloud. And we can download the ECG from the iCloud for review. So that's the technology that makes our program possible. And this slide shows you the different steps that we went through during conduction of our program. Firstly, recruit the elderly ambassadors. So in fact, if you have visited our booth, you see that our ECGs were all performed by elderly ambassadors. We recruited them, we trained them, and some of them, in fact, performed over 100 ECGs and contribute to the success of the program. And then they perform screening in the community, different community centers. And then we have a call center, we have the secretariat, and they downloaded the ECGs for us to review. So here, every week, I receive a pack of ECGs, 400s usually, and then I will review them and make the diagnosis, and then send back to the call center or secretariat. And if the citizen had atrial fibrillation, they will be contacted by the call center, and the ECG report will be sent to them, and they can take the report to seek medical attention. And after 3 to 9 months, our call center nurse will contact the participant again to see whether they have already sought medical attention, whether they have been given appropriate treatment to prevent stroke, and whether they are compliant to the drug treatment. With all these, we will have a glimpse of whether we may be able to reduce or prevent the risk of stroke with this kind of screening program. We have also set up a very resourceful website. And this slide shows you the different landmarks of our program. We have a kick-off ceremony. We have the training. We have engaged the other NGOs. And we have the award ceremony to appreciate the work of our elderly ambassador. We have a total of 84 elderly ambassadors. We have involved 106 community centers during screening. We have performed 118 screening activities within 10 months. A total of 10,734 Hong Kong citizens were screened under the program, and 244 of them had atrial fibrillation. Most important of all, 1/3 of them had newly diagnosed AF. That means without this program, they will have the disease unnoticed, untreated, and subsequently they will develop a stroke, and that will be too late. So for every 145 Hong Kong citizens we screen, we can find one newly diagnosed atrial fibrillation. And the prevalence of atrial fibrillation increases by 43.5% with the program. So that's quite a good bargain with this kind of approach. screen 145 Hong Kong citizens, you get one newly diagnosed atrial fibrillation, you treat them and you prevent them from developing stroke. However, during the follow-up questionnaire, we found that despite the fact that we identify them, only 64.9% of them have sought medical attention. So 1/3 of them, even we told them that they had atrial fibrillation, they won't go to see a doctor. And when they saw a doctor, around 47% of them received the appropriate treatment. So even the doctor has not done their job. They haven't given the patients appropriate treatment to prevent stroke. And the drug compliance for those who sought medical attention were extremely good. 99% of them would take the medication if they were prescribed the medication. So the weakest link here is we have shown that the program could identify newly diagnosed atrial fibrillation, but we still need to deliver a lot of educations to the public and to the doctors so that those who screen to have atrial fibrillation would go to find a doctor quickly, and the doctor would be knowledgeable enough to prescribe them the appropriate medications to prevent them from suffering from a stroke. And the diagnostic algorithm for the smartphone ECG was fair, I think. The specificity was good. The negative predictive value was good, but the sensitivity and positive predictive value has to be improved. And in this year, we are starting the phase 2 program. We expand with greater engagement of community partners, and we have now over 300 volunteers and 50 NGOs who would support this program. Chairman, friends, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude with these BC slides. With the emergence of technology on e-health, I am almost certain that in the near future, many of us will be using one of these devices for screening in the community, for self-monitoring of arrhythmias, of abnormal rhythm, of atrial fibrillation. However, a lot of questions remain unanswered. Who shall we screen? Who shall we recommend to self-monitor? At what level shall we screen? At the community, in the clinic, in the primary care? And what approach shall we adopt? Opportunistic approach, systematic approach? So I think we have to have these answers by doing researches and large-scale community-level screening programs like what we have done in the future. Thank you very much.